Jamaican fire meets Asian steel. A world where forbidden passion and dangerous power collide. This is Jam Asia Connections. Let's dive in.
The Dragon's Rhythm, Chapter 1, The Ghost of the Track. The fog in the Karama Mountains didn't drift, it breathed. It clung to the ancient cedars and coiled around the stone lanterns of the Obsidian Gate like a silent white serpent. Malik stood at the base of the 300 stone steps leading to the dojo, his lungs burning, not from the climb, but from the thin, biting air of Kyoto in late autumn. He was a long way from the humid, salt-kissed air of Kingston. Back home, he was a legend, the Blue Mountain Bolt. He had been a man made of lightning, a track star whose feet barely touched the earth. But that was before the rain, before the screech of tires on the slick asphalt of the palisados, and before the silence that followed the scream of his best friend. Now, Malik walked with a slight, almost imperceptible hitch in his stride. He wasn't looking for speed anymore. He was looking for a way to make his mind as still as his legs had become. He reached the top. The dojo known as Reed No Cod, the dragon's heartbeat, was a sprawling structure of dark weathered wood and white paper screens. It felt like a place outside of time. Standing in the center of the courtyard, sweeping fallen maple leaves with rhythmic, agonizing slowness, was an old man with skin like cured leather. Sensei Sato. He didn't look up as Malik approached. "You are late, Jamaican," the old man said, his voice like dry parchment rubbing together. Malik straightened his back, his shoulders broad and powerful, a stark contrast to the slender monks he had passed on the trail. "The mountain is taller than the map, say, Sensei." Sato stopped sweeping. He looked at Malik's leg, then at his eyes. "The mountain is only as tall as the weight you carry in your heart. You come here for discipline, but you smell of chaos." "I come here to learn how to fight the ghosts," Malik replied, his voice dropping into a low resonant baritone, "and how to stop them from fighting me." Sato grunted and gestured toward the shadows of the porch. "I do not teach ghosts. I teach those who are willing to be broken so they can be rebuilt. But I am old. My daughter will be your shadow. If you survive her, you may stay." From the darkness of the dojo's interior, she emerged. Yuki didn't walk, she materialized. She was dressed in a charcoal gray training gi, her obsidian hair pulled into a knot so tight it looked painful. Her face was a mask of porcelain indifference, her eyes two chips of cold flint. To the world, she was the dutiful daughter of a master. But as she stepped into the light, Malik felt a primal instinct scream in the back of his mind. This wasn't a teacher. This was a predator. She held a bakken, a wooden practice sword, in her right hand. She didn't bow. "The track star," she said, her English perfect but clipped. "My father says you were fast. In this house, speed is a lie if it has no direction." "I've got direction, Empress," Malik said, a flash of his old Jamaican bravado flickering in his eyes. He dropped his bag. "Just tell me where to start." Yuki's eyes narrowed. The air between them suddenly felt pressurized. "We start by emptying the vessel." Without warning, Yuki moved. She was a blur of charcoal silk. The bakken whistled through the air, aimed directly at Malik's injured knee. Malik's instincts, honed by years of explosive starts on the track, took over. He didn't think, he reacted. He pivoted, his feet dancing across the gravel in a way he hadn't since the accident. He felt the wind of the wooden blade brush his skin. Yuki didn't stop. She transitioned into a spinning back kick that caught Malik in the chest, sending him sprawling backward into the cold gravel. "Slow," Yuki spat, standing over him. "You move like a man trying to outrun his shadow. You cannot outrun what is already inside you." Malik gasped for air, his chest heaving. The gravel bit into his palms. He felt the familiar surge of frustration, that hot Caribbean fire that usually led to a fight or a sprint. He looked up at her, and for a moment he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not pity, but a cold, clinical curiosity. "Again," Malik growled, pushing himself up. For the next 4 hours, the courtyard became a theater of exhaustion. Yuki was relentless. She didn't just strike him, she dismantled him. She targeted his balance, his rhythm, and his ego. She forced him into positions that strained his injured tendons, pushing him to the very edge of physical collapse. By the time the sun began to dip behind the peaks, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, Malik was drenched in sweat, his body trembling. "You are weak," Yuki said, her voice showing no signs of fatigue. "You have muscle, but you have no talawa. You are all surface." Malik wiped blood from his lip, his eyes locking onto hers. The word talawa, the patois term for strength beyond size, for resilience that couldn't be shaken, hit him like a thunderbolt. She had used his own culture's word against him. She had done her homework. He stood up, his legs shaking, but his gaze was steady. He didn't take a fighting stance. He just stood there, his breathing starting to sync with the wind in the trees. "You can break my bones, Yuki," Malik whispered, the Jamaican lilt in his voice thickening, turning into a low melodic threat. "You can even break my spirit, but you can't take my rhythm. That don't belong to you, that belongs to the drum." He closed his eyes for a second, and in his mind he didn't hear the silence of the mountains. He heard the deep, pounding bass of a Kingston sound system. He heard the heartbeat of his motherland. He opened his eyes. He didn't move toward her. He simply waited. Yuki raised her bakken for a final finishing strike. She lunged, a strike meant to drop him to his knees. But Malik didn't dodge. He moved into her space, his body flowing like water, using a deceptive rhythmic sway, the freestyle agility of the islands. He caught the wooden blade between his forearms, redirected her momentum, and for the first time that day Yuki lost her footing. She stumbled, her back hitting the wooden pillar of the dojo. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. Yuki straightened her gi, her face still a mask, but a single strand of hair had fallen loose. She looked at Malik, really looked at him, and saw not a broken athlete, but a man who had just found a different kind of speed. "The drum is loud, Jamaican," she said softly, her eyes lingering on his for a second too long. "But the mountain is patient. We will see who lasts longer." She turned and vanished back into the shadows of the dojo. Sensei Sato, who had been watching from the porch, picked up his broom. "The first lesson is over," he murmured. "You have earned a mat to sleep on, but remember, Malik, Yuki is not just my daughter. She is the blade that guards this mountain, and the blade does not know how to be gentle." As Malik lay on his thin tatami mat that night, his body screaming in pain, he looked out at the moon over the Kyoto peaks. He felt the phantom pain in his knee, but for the first time since the accident, the ghosts were quiet. He didn't know that 3 miles away, in a hidden valley, a group of men in black tactical gear were unfolding a map of the Obsidian Gate. He didn't know that Yuki was currently in a hidden basement, cleaning a set of steel, throwing needles with lethal precision. He only knew that the dragon's rhythm had started to beat in his own blood, and he wasn't going to stop until the mountain moved. Chapter 2. The Shadow Guild's whisper. The second day didn't start with a bell. It started with the cold. A pre-dawn frost had settled over the Kyoto mountains, turning the dojo's courtyard into a sheet of silver. Malik's muscles felt like they had been replaced by rusted iron. Every movement was a negotiation with pain. He sat on the edge of the porch, wrapping his injured knee in a compression bandage he'd brought from home. "In Jamaica, we say, every mickle makes a muckle," he muttered to himself, his breath hitching as he pulled the wrap tight. "Small steps, Malik, just small steps. Wisdom is useless if the body cannot execute it." Yuki's voice sliced through the mist. She was standing on the roof of the main hall, silhouetted against the pale gray sky. She dropped down, landing with the soundless grace of a falling leaf. Today, she wore a darker gi, almost ink black, and her eyes seemed even colder than the mountain air. "Today, we do not spar," she stated. "Today, you carry the water. From the base of the falls to the top of the shrine. 6 trips. If you spill a drop, you start over." Malik looked at the massive wooden buckets. They were heavy even when empty. "And what does this teach me, sensei? How to be a donkey?" Yuki stepped closer, her face inches from his. The scent of sandalwood and something sharper metallic like a whetstone clung to her. "It teaches you Zanshin, lingering awareness. You are so focused on the finish line that you ignore the ground beneath your feet. That is why you crashed your car. That is why you will die here if you do not change." She turned her back on him, but Malik caught a glimpse of a tattoo peeking above her collar. A crimson spider lily, the flower of death. It wasn't the mark of a simple martial artist. The morning was a blur of agony. Malik hauled the water, his lungs screaming, his knee throbbing with every upward step. But as the hours passed, he stopped fighting the weight. He started to find a cadence. He began to hum a low, steady bass line, a dance hall rhythm he remembered from the street dances in Kingston. He timed his breathing to the beat, his footsteps falling in sync. He wasn't carrying water, he was moving with it. By the 4th trip, he noticed something strange. The woods were too quiet, no birds, no insects, only the wind. That night, Malik couldn't sleep. The pain in his leg was a dull roar.
Thanks for watching. Join the connection. Hit subscribe for more Jamaican fire and Asian steel. Stay connected. Please let us know where in the world you are watching from. Thanks for the connection. Respect.
But it was the silence of the mountain that kept him awake. He stepped out of his room, his feet bare on the cold wood. He saw a flicker of light coming from beneath the floorboards of the ancestors' hall. He moved silently, his athlete's instinct for stealth taking over. He found a loose panel in the side of the foundation and peered inside. His breath caught. It wasn't a basement, it was an armory. Beneath the peaceful dojo lay a world of sharpened steel, black masks, and maps of the city below. In the center of the room, Yuki stood before 6 women dressed in midnight blue tunics. Gone was the dutiful daughter. She stood with a terrifying authority, a long, curved kusarigama chain, sickle draped over her shoulders like a pet snake. The Iron Fang has moved into the Jian district, Yuki said, her voice a lethal rasp. They seek the scroll of the Obsidian Gate. If they find it, the balance of Kyoto falls. We kill on sight. No witnesses. No mercy. Malik backed away, his heart hammering against his ribs. She's not just a teacher, he thought. She's a ghost. You should have stayed in bed, Jamaican. The voice came from directly behind him. Malik spun, his fist already flying. Yuki caught his punch with a palm that felt like stone. She twisted his arm, pinning him against a cedar pillar before he could even blink. The transition from the basement to the porch had been impossible. She was faster than any sprinter he'd ever seen. I don't like people digging in my garden, she whispered, her eyes burning with a dark, predatory light. You're an assassin, Malik gasped, struggling against her grip. This whole place. It's a front. It is a sanctuary, Yuki hissed. And I am the wall that protects it. My father teaches peace, but I provide the silence required to keep it. She pressed a small, sharpened needle against his neck. The tip was coated in a faint green resin. Malik froze. He could feel the heat of her body, the intensity of her focus. Give me one reason why I shouldn't silence you right now, she challenged. Malik didn't flinch. He looked her straight in the eye, the Jamaican talawa rising in him. Because you know I'm the only one here who isn't afraid of you. And because the mountain isn't quiet anymore, Yuki. Look at the trees. Yuki's eyes flickered toward the forest. Her grip on him didn't loosen, but her focus shifted. A shadow detached itself from the tree line, then another. These weren't the women of Yuki's guild. These were men in heavy, reinforced armor, carrying short swords and crossbows. The Iron Fang, the rival faction, had found the hidden dojo. They followed you, Yuki whispered, a flash of genuine anger crossing her face. No, Malik replied, his voice low and steady. They followed the scent of blood. They were here before I even arrived. A crossbow bolt hissed through the air, thudding into the pillar inches from Malik's head. Yuki released him and drew a set of throwing stars in one fluid motion. Get inside. Find my father. This is not your fight. I didn't come across the world to hide in a room while the house burns, Malik said, stepping into a low, athletic stance. He grabbed a heavy wooden staff, a bow leaning against the porch. In Kingston, when the wolves come, the lions don't hide. Yuki looked at him, the injured runner with the rhythm of the islands in his soul, and for the first time she gave a small, grim nod. Don't get in my way, Malik. If you die, I won't have time to bury you. Just keep the beat, Malik grinned, though his eyes were deadly serious. I'll handle the melody. The first wave of Iron Fang assassins hit the stairs. The peace of the Kurama Mountains was shattered by the sound of steel clashing and the roar of a man who had finally stopped running from his ghosts. Chapter 3. The Dance of Blood and Base. The night air, once frozen and still, was suddenly choked with the smell of scorched ozone and the sharp tang of steel. The Iron Fang didn't attack like martial artists. They attacked like a machine. They moved in a phalanx, their heavy boots thudding on the gravel in a synchronized oppressive march. 4 on the left, 6 coming through the garden, Yuki whispered, her eyes tracking movement that Malik could barely see. She spun her kusarigama, the weighted chain singing a high-pitched, deadly note. They are disciplined. They move on a count. Break that count, or they will swallow us whole. Malik gripped the wooden bowstaff. His palms were sweaty, and his injured knee twinged with a sharp, warning heat. He looked at the armored men closing in. They were rigid. They were precise. They were everything he had tried to become, and everything he had failed at. Then he heard it. It wasn't a sound from the mountain. It was the Riddim in his head, the internal bass line that had always guided his stride on the track. Thump, thump, clap, thump, clap. They have a count, eh? Malik murmured, a reckless, jagged smile cutting across his face. Let's see how they handle a remix. The first Iron Fang soldier lunged, a mid-level thrust with a jagged short sword. To a traditional Japanese fighter, the move was textbook. But Malik didn't parry. He stuttered. He used a lightning-fast track drill, the high knee burst, to change his elevation. He dropped low, his bad knee holding just long enough for him to sweep the soldier's lead leg. As the man fell, Malik didn't follow up with a traditional strike. He bounced off his heels, spinning the staff like a windmill, catching a second attacker in the ribs with a force that sounded like a bass drum hitting a hollow chest. Yuki moved in the periphery, a blur of silver and shadow. She was a surgeon with her blade, cutting through the Iron Fang's ranks with terrifying economy. But she was being pushed back. The Iron Fang's armor was thick, and their numbers were overwhelming. They were pinning her against the shuji screens of the main hall. "Yuki, sync with me," Malik shouted over the roar of the wind. Yuki glanced at him, her eyes wide with a rare flash of confusion. "What?" "Don't fight the mountain, fight the beat." Malik exploded forward. He didn't run, he sprinted in short, violent bursts. He ignored the pain in his leg, turning his limp into a deceptive rhythmic hitch. He became a chaotic variable. He threw his staff to his left hand, punched with his right, and used the freestyle agility of a dancehall dancer to weave through the soldiers' blades. One of the Iron Fang commanders, a giant of a man in obsidian-plated armor, swung a heavy mace at Malik's head. Malik didn't retreat. He did a top rock step, a flash of Kingston Street soul, sliding under the man's guard and slamming the end of his staff into the commander's visor. Yuki watched him for a fraction of a second. She saw it then, the dragon's rhythm. Malik wasn't following a form, he was creating one. He was forcing the Iron Fang to react to him, breaking their military precision with his Caribbean fire. Yuki inhaled sharply, a new light igniting in her eyes. She stopped fighting like a guild leader and started fighting like a partner. She timed her strikes to Malik's movements. When he drove a soldier back with a heavy staff strike, she was there to finish the move with a hidden needle. When he distracted a group with a sudden explosive burst of speed, she appeared in their blind spots like a vengeful ghost. They were a storm of mahogany and moonlight. Yuki's precision provided the edge, but Malik's freestyle provided the power. The Iron Fang, confused by Malik's unpredictable timing, began to falter. Their machine was breaking. The giant commander roared, swinging his mace in a wide, desperate arc. It caught Malik's staff, snapping the seasoned wood in two. Malik stumbled, his injured knee finally buckling under the strain. He hit the gravel hard. The commander raised the mace for a killing blow. "Malik," Yuki screamed. She didn't use a weapon. She threw herself across the distance, her body a living spear. She tackled the commander, her fingers finding the gaps in his armor. But the man was too heavy. He tossed her aside like a doll. Malik looked up. The mace was descending. In that split second, the world slowed down. He didn't see the weapon. He saw the accident on the palisados. He saw the moment he stopped running. Not today, he thought. Today, we finish the race. Using his good leg, Malik launched himself upward in a desperate, explosive block start. He didn't go for the commander's head, he went for his center of gravity. He tackled the giant. His Jamaican strength, that raw talawa, power surging through him. They hit the ground together, but Malik was faster. He snatched a discarded short sword from the gravel and held it to the commander's throat. The remaining Iron Fang soldiers froze. Their leader was down. The machine had stopped. "Tell them to leave," Malik hissed, his chest heaving, blood trickling down his forehead. "Or the rhythm stops for you, right here." The commander hissed a command through his broken visor. The Iron Fang retreated into the forest, disappearing into the fog like the cowards they were. The silence that returned to the dojo was heavy, vibrating with the echoes of the fight. Malik let go of the sword and collapsed onto his back, staring at the stars. His knee was on fire. His lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. Yuki walked over to him. Her GI was torn, and a thin cut ran down her cheek, but she looked more alive than Malik had ever seen her. She stood over him, silhouetted against the moon. She didn't offer a hand to help him up. Instead, she sat down on the gravel beside him. "Your rhythm," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It is noisy. It is chaotic. It makes no sense." Malik chuckled, a dry, painful sound. "That's what they say about Jamaica, Empress. But we still make the world dance." Yuki looked at him, and for the first time she smiled. It wasn't a mask, it wasn't a duty. It was a genuine, beautiful curve of the lips that reached her eyes. "You did not break, Malik," she said. She reached out, her fingers grazing the back of his hand. Her skin was cold, but her touch felt like a brand. "You have Tilawa, more than I realized." Malik turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. The contrast, the deep mahogany of his skin against her porcelain paleness, was striking in the moonlight. "I told you. I'm not just a runner, I'm the drum." "Then we must keep playing," Yuki replied, her gaze intensifying. "The Iron Fang will return, and next time, they will bring the dragon it." Malik pulled her slightly closer, the adrenaline fading into a deep electric heat between them. "Let them come. I've been looking for a reason to really move." High above, in the shadows of the dojo porch, Sensei Sato watched them. He saw the hands joined in the moonlight. He saw the broken staff and the defeated commander. He began to sweep the gravel. Again, a small, knowing smile on his face. The mountain was no longer quiet. It had a heartbeat. Chapter 4. The heart of the Obsidian Gate. The aftermath of the battle left the dojo smelling of iron and damp earth. Malik's knee had finally given out. The joint was swollen to the size of a grapefruit. A hot, throbbing reminder of the price of his freestyle victory. He sat in the washroom, his teeth gritted as he tried to wrap it, when the sliding door moved. Yuki stood there, no longer in her combat gear, but in a simple indigo yukata. She carried a blackened ceramic pot and a roll of silk needles. "You fought like a lion, Malik," she said, her voice softer than usual. "But a lion with a broken leg is just a meal for the wolves. Follow me. The dojo's medicine is not enough for what you have done to yourself." She led him out the back of the estate, deeper into the forest than he had ever gone. They hiked, Malik leaning heavily on a new staff, until they reached a narrow cleft in the rock face, hidden behind a veil of frozen wisteria. Inside was the Yusenkiri, the hidden spring. The air was thick with sulfur and the scent of ancient cedar. Steam rose in ghostly plumes from a pool of milk-blue water carved naturally into the volcanic stone. Torches burned in iron brackets, reflecting off a massive black stone gate at the far end of the cave, the true Obsidian Gate. "Get in," Yuki commanded. Malik stripped to his waist, his mahogany skin decorated with the fresh purple bruises of the fight. As he stepped into the water, he gasped. It wasn't just hot, it felt electric. "This water sits on a vein of the mountain spirit," Yuki explained. She knelt at the edge of the pool, pulling Malik's leg toward her. She began to apply a thick, pungent paste of ground herbs and charcoal to his knee. "In Japan, we believe the mountain heals those who protect it, but I must guide the flow." She took a long silver needle and held it over a torch until it glowed orange. "This will hurt more than the mace." "Do it," Malik rasped, gripping the edge of the stone. "Me survive Kingston potholes and Olympic qualifiers. A little needle can't stop me." As she drove the needle into the pressure point, Malik's world turned white. He didn't scream, but a low, guttural growl escaped his throat. Yuki didn't flinch. She placed her other hand flat against his chest, right over his heart. "Focus, Malik," she whispered, her eyes locked onto his. "Find the rhythm, not the drum of the street, but the pulse of the stone. Synchronize your breath with the mountain." Malik closed his eyes. He felt her hand cool against his burning skin, and the heat of the needle. He started to breathe deep, pulling the talawa from his core. He imagined his blood as a river, clearing the debris of the accident, the trauma of the crash, the guilt of the survivor. Slowly, the jagged pain began to smooth out. The hitch in his spirit felt like it was being ironed out by her touch. When he opened his eyes, the steam had thickened, swirling around them in an intimate cocoon. Yuki was still holding his chest, her face inches from his. The cold assassin was gone. In her place was a woman who looked at him with an intensity that made the volcanic water feel like ice. "Why did you really come here, Malik?" she asked, her voice a breathy tremor. "I was fast, Yuki. So fast I thought I could outrun time," Malik said, his voice raw. "But when the car flipped, I realized I was just running away from myself. I came here to find a reason to stand still. I didn't expect the reason to be a woman with a blade in her hand." Yuki's fingers curled slightly against his skin. "I was born to be a shadow. I have never been a reason for anyone. Only a weapon." "Then you're a beautiful weapon," Malik murmured. He reached out, his hand dripping with the sacred water, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "But even a blade needs a hand to hold it." The tension between them snapped. Yuki leaned forward, her lips meeting his in a kiss that tasted of salt, steam, and desperation. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision of two worlds, the heat of the Caribbean and the discipline of the East. In that moment, the dragon's rhythm wasn't a martial art. It was the synchronized beating of their hearts. But the moment was shattered by a cold, sharp sound from the shadows of the cave. Clap, 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 moving, truly moving. A feminine voice dripped with sarcasm. Yuki pushed back from Malik, her hand instantly flying to the hidden dagger in her yukata. Malik struggled to stand in the water. Emerging from the darkness near the Obsidian Gate was Hana, Yuki's second-in-command and the guild's most lethal infiltrator. Behind her stood 4 other sisters of the guild, their faces masked, their eyes filled with judgment. "Hana," Yuki hissed, her voice returning to its lethal chill. "What is the meaning of this? This is sacred ground." "It was sacred," Hana spat, her eyes darting to Malik with pure venom. "Until you brought this gaijin here. Until you let his rhythm infect the purity of our order. Look at you, Yuki-sama. You are soft. You are distracted. The Iron Fang is at our doorstep, and you are playing in the water with a broken runner." He saved the dojo, Yuki countered, stepping between Malik and the sisters. He attracted the Iron Fang, Hana corrected. She stepped forward, holding a scroll with the seal of the Iron Fang. They don't want the gate, they want him. They offered a treaty: we hand over the Jamaican, and the Obsidian Gate remains untouched. I have already accepted the terms. Yuki's face went deathly pale. You betrayed your sensei. You betrayed your sister. I saved the guild, Hana said, and with a flick of her wrist, the four sisters drew their blades. The dragon's heartbeat is failing, Yuki. It's time for a new pulse. Hana signaled the attack, but she didn't target Yuki. She threw a poison needle directly at Malik's throat. Yuki moved with a scream of rage, her silk sleeve whipping through the air to swat the needle away. But the betrayal was complete. The sanctuary had become a slaughterhouse. Malik, get out, Yuki shouted, drawing her hidden blades. I'm not leaving you to these snakes, Malik roared. He lunged out of the water, his knee feeling strangely light. The ancient healing had worked, but it wasn't fully tested. The battle in the cave began, a chaotic swirl of indigo and shadow, while the milk-blue water turned to dark, bruising crimson. Chapter 5. The Serpents Strike the Hidden Spring. Once a place of healing had become a tomb of steam and steel. Hana's betrayal cut deeper than any blade, but Yuki didn't have time to mourn the sisterhood. She was a whirlwind of indigo silk, her twin daggers clashing against the curved blades of the women she had trained herself. You chose a stranger over your own blood, Hana screamed, her face contorted as she swung a weighted chain. You've forgotten who we are, Yuki. I am exactly who I've always been, Yuki countered, parrying a strike that would have taken her head. The shadow that protects the light, you're just a scavenger. Malik surged out of the pool, his skin steaming in the cold cave air. His knee felt strange tight, vibrating with the phantom heat, but stable. He grabbed his heavy staff, which he'd dropped near the water. As one of the sisters lunged at him, he didn't retreat. He used a triple jump maneuver, planting his good leg and pivoting with a power that cracked the stone floor. He caught the assassin mid-air with the staff, sending her crashing into the stalactites. Yuki, we can't win a war of attrition in a hole. Malik shouted, we need space. The back exit. Yuki pointed toward a narrow crevice behind the Obsidian Gate. Go! They broke through the line of assassins, Malik using his broad shoulders to batter through the masks, while Yuki provided the lethal cover. They squeezed through the rock face just as a volley of poisoned needles thudded into the stone behind them. The exit didn't lead back to the dojo. It spat them out onto a steep, rain-slicked mountain pass that looked down on the sprawling neon grid of Kyoto. The city glowed like a falling galaxy, a world of high-tech glass and ancient wood waiting to swallow them. There is a maintenance shack a mile down, Yuki panted, her breath hitching. My father kept a transport there for emergencies. If Hana has alerted the Iron Fang, the main roads will be a death trap. They ran. Malik felt the rhythm returning, not the slow, steady pulse of the mountain, but the explosive, jagged beat of a 100-meter final. His knee held, every stride felt like he was reclaiming a piece of his soul. They reached the shack just as the roar of engines echoed from the switchbacks below. Inside, under a dusty tarp, sat a custom-built, matte black Kawasaki Ninja. It was a beast of a machine, stripped of all unnecessary weight, built for the narrow, vertical labyrinths of Japan. You know how to ride? Yuki asked, throwing him the keys. Malik caught them, a dark, reckless grin spreading across his face. In Kingston, if you can't ride a bike through a crowded market while carrying a sound system, you don't call yourself a man. Hold on tight, Empress. This isn't a track. It's a runway. Yuki climbed on behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist, her chest pressed to his back. Malik kicked the engine to life. The roar was a beautiful, violent bass line that shook the very foundation of the shack. They exploded onto the mountain road just as three black SUVs with tinted windows swerved around the corner. The Iron Fang, Malik, crossbows, Yuki warned. Bolts hissed past them, sparks flying as they struck the asphalt. Malik leaned the bike so low his knee puckered near the ground. He wasn't just driving, he was sprinting. He used the freestyle agility he'd practiced at the dojo, weaving the bike in a rhythmic, unpredictable zigzag that made it impossible for the shooters to aim. Cho, knew too slow. Malik yelled into the wind, his patois erupting as his adrenaline peaked. They hit the outskirts of Kyoto, the quiet mountain air replaced by the sensory assault of Gion. They flew through narrow alleys where paper lanterns swayed in their wake, past bewildered tourists and glowing vending machines. The SUVs were being replaced by high-speed pursuit bikes, Iron Fang riders in reinforced armor. They were gaining the canal road. Yuki shouted in his ear, "If we hit the highway, they'll box us in." Malik banked the bike hard left, skidding onto a narrow pedestrian path alongside the Shirakawa Canal. The Iron Fang riders followed, their engines screaming. One rider pulled alongside, swinging a telescopic baton. Yuki didn't hesitate. She leaned out, her body seemingly defying gravity, and jammed a small steel rod into the rider's front wheel. The bike fell. The bike flipped spectacularly, crashing into the shallow water. "One down," she called out. But the city was closing in ahead. A massive transport truck, deliberately placed, was jackknifed across the bridge, blocking their escape. Behind them, the remaining riders and an SUV were closing the gap. They were trapped. "Malik, the bridge is blocked." Yuki's voice held a rare note of fear. Malik looked at the truck, then at a narrow wooden pedestrian ramp that led to the upper level of a parking garage overlooking the canal. It was a gap of at least 20 feet. It was impossible. It was a jump that required perfect speed, perfect timing, and a complete lack of fear. It was a sprint. "Yuki, do you trust my rhythm?" Malik asked, his voice steadying, the world slowing down just like it used to at the starting blocks. Yuki tightened her grip on him. She felt the heat radiating off his body, the absolute talawa of his spirit. "To the end, Malik. Move." Malik shifted gears, the Kawasaki screaming as he redlined the engine. He didn't look at the truck. He looked at the sky. "Riddim, move me," he roared. The bike hit the ramp. For a heartbeat, the sound of the city vanished. They were airborne, a silhouette of black steel, and two souls suspended against the neon glow of the Kyoto skyline. It was the longest sprint of Malik's life. They landed on the concrete of the upper deck with a bone-jarring thud. Malik wrestled the bike back into control, tires smoking as he spun a 180-degree turn. They looked down. Below them, the Iron Fang riders were stuck at the blockade, staring up in disbelief. Malik killed the engine. The silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the cooling metal. He was shaking, but his knee was solid. He turned to Yuki. Her hair was a wild cloud, her eyes blown wide with a mixture of terror and awe. You jumped a building," she whispered. "I told you," Malik panted, wiping sweat and road grime from his forehead. "The drum don't stop for no wall." Yuki reached up, cupping his face. The coldness of the assassin was gone, replaced by a raw, burning hunger. She kissed him, a hard, triumphant kiss that tasted of gasoline and victory. But as they pulled apart, the giant digital billboard across the street flickered. The image of a beautiful, ancient cherry blossom tree appeared. But it was being consumed by digital fire. A voice crackled over the city's emergency broadcast system, a deep, distorted growl. "Sensei Sato is in our hands. The Obsidian Gate will be opened at dawn. Come to the dragon's throat, or watch your heritage burn." Yuki's face went white. "My father." Malik gripped her hand, his eyes turning to cold mahogany flint. "The race isn't over yet, Empress. We're just hitting the final turn." Chapter 6. The final heartbeat, the dragon's throat, was a nightmare of obsidian and iron. A geothermal fortress built directly into the mouth of the Mount Kurama caldera. Red emergency lights pulsed like a failing heart, casting long, jagged shadows against the steam-venting walls. High-tech servers hummed beside ancient stone altars, the Iron Fang's attempt to bridge modern power with the mountain's spiritual core. Malik and Yuki stood at the entrance of the great chamber. Below them, suspended over a churning pit of molten rock, was a circular platform. Sensei Sato was bound there, his head bowed, while General Koda and the traitorous Hana stood over him, holding a ceremonial jade key. "The dawn is breaking, Yuki," Hana's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by the volcanic walls. "Once the gate is opened, the energy of this mountain will belong to the Iron Fang. Your father's peace will be a footnote in history." General Koda, a mountain of a man encased in obsidian-plated exo-armor, stepped forward. "And the Jamaican, he's a glitch in the system. Delete him." Malik looked at the platform, then at Yuki. His knee was screaming, the ancient healing pushed to its absolute limit by the motorcycle jump. He knew he had one good sprint left in him, one chance to be the lightning. "Yuki," Malik whispered, his voice a low, vibrating rumble. "You handle the snake. I'll handle the mountain." Yuki gripped her blades, her eyes burning with a cold, righteous fire. "To the end, Malik. To the end, Empress." They moved. Yuki was a shadow in flight, leaping across the industrial catwalks to meet Hana. Their blades clashed in a shower of sparks, a desperate duet of sister against sister. Hana fought with the bitterness of a jealous soul, but Yuki fought with the talawa she had absorbed from Malik, a resilience that didn't just defend, but dominated. Meanwhile, Malik dropped to the floor, facing General Koda. The general's exo-armor whirred as he raised a massive, hydraulic-powered fist. "You can't outrun a machine, runner," Kyoto sneered. "I'm not outrunning you, Star," Malik said, dropping into a sprinter's crouch. His patois was thick now, a spiritual chant. "Mia, bring the thunder." Kyoto lunged. The ground shook with every step of the heavy armor. Malik didn't move until the last microsecond. He used his freestyle agility, sliding under the general's massive legs, his movements a blur of rhythmic deception. He struck at the cooling vents of the armor with his broken staff, but it was like hitting a tank on the platform. Hana forced Yuki to the edge. "You're weak because you love him," Hana screamed, swinging her chain. "I'm strong because I have something to fight for," Yuki countered. She didn't parry the chain. She caught it with her bare, wrapped hand, ignoring the blood, and yanked Hana toward her, delivering a devastating palm strike to the traitor's chest. But General Kyoto had seen enough. He activated a thermal pulse that sent Malik flying backward, his back hitting a stone pillar with a sickening thud. Malik's vision swam. He saw Kyoto raising a heavy cannon integrated into his arm, aiming it at the platform's support cables. "If I can't have the gate, no one will," Kyoto roared. If those cables snapped, Sato and Yuki would drop into the lava. Malik looked at his knee. It was swollen, the skin purple. He felt the ghosts of his past, the crash, the fear, the failure. But then he heard the rhythm. It wasn't just in his head anymore. The volcano was pulsing. The earth was thumping, thump thump clap. He realized then, the dragon's rhythm wasn't a style. It was the connection between the soul and the earth. "Riddim, move me," Malik exploded. He ignored the pain. He ignored the doctors who said he'd never run again. He became a streak of mahogany light. In a single impossible 40-yard dash, he covered the distance across the crumbling catwalks. He didn't go for Kyoto. He went for the cables. As Kyoto fired, Malik threw himself into the path of the blast, using a heavy metal shield he'd snatched from the wall. The impact shattered the shield and sent a shockwave through his body, but the cables remained intact. Malik landed on the platform, skidding to a halt beside Yuki and Sato. His knee finally gave way with a sickening pop. He collapsed, but he was smiling. "Malik," you cried out, dropping her guard for a second. General Kyoto laughed, stepping onto the platform. "Now, you die. You die together." But the general had forgotten one thing. Yuki and Malik were no longer fighting as individuals. Yuki grabbed Malik's hand, pulling him up. He leaned his weight on her, his strength becoming her stability, her precision becoming his aim. They stood together, a blend of Japanese discipline and Jamaican fire. Kyoto swung his massive fist. Yuki guided Malik's momentum. They moved as one. Malik used his powerful upper body to deflect the general's arm, while Yuki used the opening to drive her final blackened steel dagger into the power core of the exo-armor. The armor screeched. Sparks engulfed the general. With a final combined push, Malik and Yuki sent the mountain of obsidian stumbling back, over the edge of the platform and into the abyss below. Hana, seeing her leader fall, tried to flee, but the Shadow Guild sisters, the ones who had remained loyal to Sato, emerged from the vents, surrounding her. The betrayal was over. Silence fell over the dragon's throat, broken only by the bubbling of the lava far below. The first rays of dawn pierced through the volcanic vents, hitting the Obsidian Gate. It didn't explode with power. It glowed with a soft, steady amber light. The mountain was at peace. Yuki knelt beside Malik, who was panting, his face covered in soot but his eyes bright. She held his face in her hands, her tears washing tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "You saved him," she whispered. "You saved us all. But your leg." Malik looked at his knee, then back at her. He took her hand and kissed her palm. "I told you, Empress, I'm done running away. I think I'm okay with walking for a while, as long as I'm walking with you." Sensei Sato stood up, shaking off his bonds. He looked at the Jamaican man and his Japanese daughter. He didn't see a student and a teacher. He saw the future of the Obsidian Gate. "The rhythm has changed," Sato said softly. "The mountain has found a new heart." 1 month later, the dojo at the Obsidian Gate was being rebuilt. But it looked different now. The traditional Japanese architecture remained, but there were new touches, vibrant colors, the smell of jerk spices wafting from the kitchen, and a set of heavy bass speakers in the corner of the training hall. Malik sat on the porch, his leg in a brace, watching a new group of students. He wasn't teaching them forms. He was teaching them how to find their internal beat. Yuki stepped out beside him, wearing a white yukata with a red hibiscus flower embroidered on the shoulder. She sat down, leaning her head on his shoulder. "The new students are confused," she teased. "They asked why we are practicing to the sound of a drum." Malik laughed, wrapping his arm around her. "Tell them, it's the only way to make the mountain dance." They looked out over the Kyoto Valley. The ice prince and the cleaner of the corporate world were a world away. But here, in the mountains, a new legend had been born. A world where Jamaican strength and Japanese mystery had collided to create something raw, dramatic, and unforgettable. The dragon had a new rhythm, and for the first time in his life, Malik was exactly where he was meant to be. The end.
Thanks for watching. Join the connection. Hit subscribe for more Jamaican fire and Asian steel. Stay connected. Please let us know where in the world you are watching from. Thanks for the connection. Respect.